Number 1. The land where the Nile both sustains and drowns people. South Sudan is like a young land slowly finding its identity in the heart of Northeast Africa, its territory surrounded by 6 neighboring countries. To the north, it borders Sudan, to the east, Ethiopia, and to the southeast, it connects Kenya and Uganda. To the south is the Democratic Republic of Congo, while to the west, it borders the Central African Republic. Spanning over 669,000 square kilometers, the country offers vast natural landscapes, from dry golden savannas to endless stretches of wetlands. At the heart of this landscape lies the Sud wetlands, nourished by the White Nile, a river that flows through the country like a silent lifeline, sustaining agriculture and ecosystems. Numerous conservation surveys have noted that the Sud is a seasonal refuge for migratory water birds from the Horn of Africa, creating expansive wintering grounds during the rainy season when the water reaches the edge of the savanna. The natural landscape here also serves as the stage for a large-scale antelope migration, a journey that takes place annually across the expansive plains. This image is often compared to the Serengeti migration, where animals cross Kenyan and Tanzanian territory. Some biogeographical records show that the black-eared white antelope herds in South Sudan move according to water cycles, sometimes traveling long distances in search of new pastures, reflecting the close relationship between climate and their survival behavior. South Sudan's climate operates in 2 distinct seasons. The rainy season lasts from April to October, when vegetation flourishes and fields turn a deep green. The dry season, from November to March, brings widespread heat and drought in many areas. During this period, many local communities must adjust their farming and livestock schedules according to river levels, as changes in flow directly affect food, grazing, and even migration between plains. That rhythm forces the people here to live in harmony with nature instead of trying to fight against it. Number 2. A historical dividing line and wounds that have never healed. South Sudan today is considered one of the youngest nations on the planet, having only separated from Sudan and declared independence in 2011. However, the moment marking the birth of a new nation was not a complete celebration, but the culmination of decades of conflict, social divisions, and stratified policies rooted in colonial rule. The story begins with the period when the region was under a joint British-Egyptian system of governance, where real power remained largely in the hands of the British. From that time, North and South Sudan were governed as 2 distinct worlds. The North, heavily influenced by Arab and Islamic culture, received significantly more investment in infrastructure, education, and administration. Conversely, the South, home to many indigenous communities with diverse religious and linguistic systems, was marginalized, with very little access to resources for development. Numerous colonial-era documents reveal that the British government implemented a policy of restricted interaction in the South, isolating it from the North both economically and educationally. Some modern studies also indicate that the redrawn administrative boundaries during the colonial period inadvertently created an ethnic and religious divide that persisted into the post-independence era. Over time, this difference evolved from a mere development gap into a deep rift in the social structure. The civil wars that lasted throughout the latter half of the 20th century are directly linked by many scholars to this process of political, cultural, and power separation between the 2 regions. Even after the 2005 Comprehensive Peace Agreement, historical tensions did not completely disappear, and this series of events paved the way for the formation of South Sudan, an independent nation still bearing the scars of an unhealed past. Number 3. Independence bought with war, oil, and a price no one could have foreseen. After Sudan gained independence in 1956, the conflicts between the 2 regions did not end, but continued to smolder like a crack that was never truly healed. The central government, controlled by the North, continued to govern the country in a centralized manner, while the South remained outside of crucial development decisions. From this prolonged discontent, the First Sudanese Civil War erupted, beginning in 1955 and only ending in 1972, leaving a painful chapter in history. The First War exposed the efforts of Southern communities in their struggle against oppression and exclusion from the political system. The Addis Ababa Agreement emerged as a temporary hope, granting the South limited autonomy, creating a fragile pause between violence and reconciliation. However, peace did not last. In 1983, the central government imposed Islamic law throughout the territory, including the south, where the majority of the population was Christian and maintained their traditional beliefs. This decision caused tensions to flare up again. Many regional historical documents note that the imposition of religious law on areas with distinct cultures sparked widespread resistance among indigenous communities in the south, shifting the conflict from political to an identity-based struggle. At the same time, the discovery of oil fields in the south further complicated the confrontation, as economic interests became intertwined with the fighting. The Second Sudanese Civil War lasted until 2005, far more brutal than the first. Humanitarian reports from this period estimate that millions were killed or displaced, and many rural areas were left empty as people fled the conflict. The turning point came when the Comprehensive Peace Agreement was signed with the participation of international organizations, ushering in a 6-year transition period and a promise of self-determination. In 2011, the people of the South voted overwhelmingly for a path to separation from Sudan, and on July 9th, South Sudan officially appeared on the world map as an independent nation. But freedom also brought great challenges. A newly born country with deep scars of war, fragile infrastructure, and a still turbulent journey to stability. Number 4. Communities living between sacred identity and conflicting realities. After decades of conflict and division that shaped South Sudan's history, a different picture of this young nation emerges from its cultural life. It is home to many ethnic communities such as the Dinka, Nuer, and Shilluk, each preserving rituals, customs, and ways of life passed down through generations. Some communities live their lives intertwined with livestock on the vast savannas, others depend on rivers and fishing, while still others are renowned for their wood carving and the crafting of traditional ceremonial musical instruments. In many rural areas, community gathering spaces are still organized around cattle pastures or water sources, where rituals, labor, and social life intertwine within a single space. Among these groups, the Dinka are the most populous and also one of the most talked about. For them, livestock are not only economic assets, but also symbols of honor and social status. The number of cattle a man owns can influence his status within the community, from marriage prospects to his role in indigenous religious rituals. Some anthropological studies note that the names of individual cattle are linked to family memories, and many traditional songs are composed based on their characteristics or temperaments. In coming-of-age rituals, young men enter adulthood through ceremonies directly connected to their family's livestock. Cultural life is also evident in marriage customs and family structure. The value of a bride is often tied to the number of cattle exchanged between the two families, while kinship mechanisms allow relatives to continue caring for widows as a way of maintaining community responsibility and family ties. On a deeper spiritual level, the belief in sacrifice to restore spiritual balance remains present in the legends and oral traditions of many communities. These elements not only reflect indigenous beliefs, but also show how the people here connect material life with the spiritual world, like an invisible thread linking people, nature, and cultural symbols across generations. It is this intertwining of livelihoods, rituals, and identity that has created a cultural life that is both sacred and full of contradictions with the turbulent social reality of South Sudan. Number 5. Mundari, where survival is transformed into a ritual performed on the human body. Among the Mundari people of South Sudan, the ash from burning cow dung is not a mystical ritual, but a part of daily life. Women and men often rub the ash on their skin, especially in the morning and before bed, to repel mosquitoes, reduce sweating, and mitigate the smell of the barns where they live and rest near their cattle. The ash becomes a cheap, effective, and suitable protective layer for the grassland environment, where sprays and modern products are not always available. For the Mundari, this is a practical survival solution, not an act of attention or cultural performance. Occasionally, young women may lightly spray cow urine on their hair. The natural ammonia turns the hair a yellowish-orange hue. This hair color has symbolic meaning: attachment to the herd, transition to adulthood, and the presence of women in their cattle-based social structure. This isn't an everyday occurrence, nor an extreme ritual, but rather a cultural choice caught between pragmatic habits and a form of community identity. From an outsider's perspective, the custom might be mistaken for something strange. But in the context of Mundari, everything is tied to living conditions: hot climate, swarms of mosquitoes, tents situated close to herds of cattle, and livestock being the center of economic honor and identity. Viewed through the lens of survival, the ash on the skin isn't unusual, but rather a way for a community to create a protective tool from its resources. The noteworthy aspect isn't the ash or the cow urine, but how culture shapes the solution. Mundari demonstrates that each society builds its own logic based on its environment and values. In your opinion, is this our strange custom or a perfectly logical survival choice? If you lived in Mundari's conditions, would you be willing to accept this approach? Number 6. When clean water disappears and disease becomes the fate of the entire community. Beyond the stories of culture and women's lives, another layer of South Sudan's reality emerges, silent but far harsher. In many rural areas and resettlement zones, millions still live without access to clean water or proper sanitation facilities. This leaves the majority of the population without access to basic hygiene, and from this gap, simple, preventable diseases become a constant threat to the entire community. In many areas, people are forced to draw water from stagnant ponds or canals used for both domestic and livestock purposes, making the risk of infection ever present in daily life. The consequences extend beyond physical health. With a thin healthcare network and treatment facilities located far from populated areas, even minor illnesses can become life-threatening. Poor sanitation, malnutrition, and a weak healthcare system create a vicious cycle where disease not only claims lives, but also plunges families deeper into poverty. Some humanitarian reports note that even a single outbreak of diarrhea, cholera, or malaria can quickly overwhelm makeshift health stations, as many patients have to travel for hours or even by road through flooded areas to find treatment. In this context, people place their hopes on government investment. However, public funding for health is only a small percentage, leaving much of healthcare dependent on international humanitarian organizations. These organizations bring vaccines, medicines, and volunteers to remote areas where local health systems struggle to function effectively. However, many support programs are only temporary, dependent on phased funding, making long-term sustainability a challenge. And so, relief efforts are merely attempts to patch up small pieces of a fractured system. Clean water remains scarce, sanitation facilities are still inadequate, and healthcare remains sparsely distributed across vast populated areas. People continue to live in a vicious cycle of disease, poverty, and a fragile hope, where sustainable solutions seem far removed from the pressing needs of daily life. Number 7. A road turned into mud, and a country isolated in silence. To understand the extent of South Sudan's decline, the journey begins with its roads, which tell part of the story. A flight to Bentiu, which should have taken only about an hour, stretched to 3 hours because the plane had to stop at numerous makeshift airports with unpaved runways. It was just soft mud, and each time the landing gear touched down, the aircraft seemed to be sucked into the wet ground. Even the pilot admitted he could hardly feel safe in such conditions. Along the runways, the rusty frames of damaged planes and helicopters lay silent fragments of a failing infrastructure. On the ground, the situation was even more dire. Only a very small fraction of the country's roads were paved. The vast majority were dirt roads. When the rain poured down, everything turned into deep mud, trapping vehicles and isolating villages and towns. For many families, leaving their homes is not just about moving, but a choice that involves risk. Some regional infrastructure reports have noted that stretches of only a few dozen kilometers can take hours, even days, to traverse during the rainy season, as vehicles are forced to stop repeatedly or turn back when the road collapses. In Bentiu, recent floods have almost completely blurred the line between roads and water. Sections that were once vital transportation routes are now only recognizable by rows of power poles running through the flooded areas. Residents wade through water for hours, even days, to find dry firewood in the deep floodwaters, then carry it back to sell as charcoal for household use. Roads cut off by floods have forced transportation to rely on boats or planes, significantly increasing the cost of goods and directly impacting the prices of food and essential supplies in the town. In many parts of the world, roads are symbols of connectivity. But here, the runway is just mud, the highway becomes a canal, and an entire community must live with the feeling of being cut off from the rest of the world, as if borders are no longer drawn on maps, but on impassable stretches of road. Number 8. Life flows with the rhythm of the Nile. Floods swallow the land, droughts swallow hope. On a map, South Sudan appears as a vast, arid wasteland, but upon closer inspection, one realizes that life here is inextricably linked to a river, the White Nile, one of the main tributaries of the Nile River system that once nourished ancient civilizations in North Africa. In this land, the river almost dictates how people survive, where they settle, when they cultivate their crops, and even their daily food sources. In many riverside villages, community life revolves around the ebb and flow of the water, from planting crops to moving livestock. During the rainy season, the water rises and overflows the riverbanks, sweeping away fields, destroying homes, and forcing many families to abandon their homes. But when the dry season arrives, the picture is completely reversed. Extreme temperatures and lack of rain make finding water a constant struggle. Several regional environmental reports note that in years of extreme water level fluctuations, entire communities must temporarily relocate with the water, setting up new camps on higher ground to protect livestock and food. This harsh natural cycle directly impacts all activities around the river. Fishermen dependent on fish catches may see them disappear after a major flood. Farmers must adjust their crops according to the ebb and flow of the water. In many riverside grasslands, herders walk kilometers to find remaining pasture after the dry season, a journey that can last for days in sweltering heat and hot winds. In areas experiencing prolonged flooding, many families build temporary stilt houses or travel by small boats, making living with the water a part of their daily lives. For communities living along the White Nile, the river is both a source of livelihood and a major challenge. It brings fish, silt, and arable land, but at the same time, it forces people to adapt and live in accordance with the changing rhythm of nature, as an unwritten rule that has existed for generations. Number 9. Camera lenses, and the invisible fear that envelops every glance. In South Sudan, cameras are more than just tools for documenting life. They carry a different, sensitive, and cautious meaning. Even at the airport, simply carrying a professional video camera or large lens can lead to being stopped and questioned. Here, filming is generally seen as a risky activity, and even raising a phone to film a scene on the street can result in interference from security forces. Several field reports have documented that even film crews with permits have to spend considerable time explaining themselves before being allowed to film in public areas. When out on the streets, this sense of apprehension seems to pervade every gaze. Many people don't want to be filmed, not because they hate cameras, but because they fear their images might be misinterpreted or placed in an unintended context. Just pointing a camera at them can trigger an immediate reaction. Some people protest loudly, others approach to demand that the camera stop, and sometimes a group of people around will join in out of a natural sense of self-preservation. In many cases, memories of war, crime, and instability lead the community to view the camera as a risk-taking object rather than a harmless device. Even when the photographer is only shooting landscapes or streets, checks for documents, questioning, or pressure can still occur. A valid permit is not always enough to dispel suspicion. In a place where history has left cracks in social trust, the camera becomes the boundary between documenting reality and touching upon people's anxieties. Therefore, South Sudan is harsh not only in its physical conditions, but also in how images are perceived. Here, every click of the camera requires patience, empathy, and a deep respect for the silent fears of the people who live in this land. If you were in that situation, would you choose to continue filming or put the camera down to keep yourself safe? And do you think a camera in such a place should be seen as a storytelling tool or a boundary to be wary of? Number 10. Poverty amidst abundant resources, where wealth belongs only to a powerful few. Despite possessing fertile lands, the reality for the majority of South Sudan's people is a stark contrast to that image. It is a life of extreme poverty and a daily struggle for survival. Of the approximately 12 million inhabitants, over 80% live in rural areas, where farming and livestock raising are not just livelihoods, but the only way to get food on the table. Development statistics show that the majority live on extremely low incomes, and more than half the population regularly faces chronic food shortages, as conflict, climate change, and successive economic shocks make everything even more precarious. Here, a harvest depends not only on hard work, but also on the hope that rain will not cause floods, and drought will not wipe out what remains in the fields. In this context, natural resources, from oil to minerals, which could seemingly transform people's lives, are in the hands of a small, powerful group. Corruption and poor infrastructure mean that the majority of society receives only meager scraps of wealth. This vicious cycle repeats year after year. Poverty creates a lack of opportunity, and a lack of opportunity keeps the country stagnant. And then, the most striking revelation of this disparity lies in the most basic human needs: clean water, sanitation, and healthcare. Number 11. Children grow up outside the classroom, and their future is locked away from a very young age. In the story of South Sudan, education appears as a mirror reflecting the extent of poverty and the gaps in social development. More than 70% of children do not attend school because, for many families, daily survival is more important than any other goal. Children are forced to help with farm work, livestock raising, or household labor, and the path to education is gradually pushed to the sidelines as a privilege they cannot afford. In many rural communities, the distance to school can be kilometers, forcing children to walk through flooded or dusty areas, making attending class even more difficult. For girls, this reality is even more severe. Social norms that value child marriage and domestic roles have deprived them of opportunities for early education. But the risks don't stop at being excluded from school. Numerous humanitarian reports indicate that children face the risk of harassment and violence in everyday activities, such as fetching water, gathering firewood, or using public restrooms, especially in remote areas. Some families even believe that keeping their daughters at home is safer, even if it means ending their education. In conflict zones, violence and instability force schools to close or disrupt operations, shattering an already fragile educational environment. Field observations show that the lack of safe school spaces forces many families to keep their children out of school for extended periods, inadvertently locking away their access to knowledge for years. The ultimate result is clear. When children, especially girls, are deprived of education, the cycle of poverty continues and is passed down from generation to generation. The opportunity for a better life thus becomes fragile, like a door to the future that was never truly opened. And in many communities, this trade-off not only takes away knowledge, but also takes away hope for a society that can escape the cycle of prolonged poverty. Number 12. When ritual and music must coexist with poverty and instability. South Sudan is not only a young territory on the map, but also a space of diverse people, languages, and beliefs. While English is recognized as the official language, over 60 indigenous languages still exist and are used in daily life, creating a rich network of communication between different communities. Many regional linguistic studies suggest that this diversity reflects the long history of migration of these groups, where each community preserves its language as an inseparable part of its identity. In religious life, this blending occurs in a subtle way. Christianity is the dominant religion, but in many communities, it coexists with traditional beliefs, where people still seek guidance from their ancestors and the spiritual world. Elders tell stories of Nikang of the Shilluk people, a cultural hero seen as a protective symbol for their people. Meanwhile, the legends of the Dinka people view livestock as gifts from the spirit world, a link between human life and spiritual depth. These values exist not only in oral tradition, but are also expressed through music and rituals. The sound of drums signals the beginning of communal dances, where young people gather in large circles to dance the jing, celebrating the rainy season and the fertility of the land. In some areas, the Anda people's rituals are performed around giant drums, not only as an act of warding off evil, but also as a way to unite the community during the changing seasons. However, this vibrant culture cannot mask the harsh realities. Alongside music, rituals, and beliefs, the people still live with anxieties about livelihood, the harsh climate, and challenges that never disappear, forming a silent contrast alongside the beauty of their cultural identity. Number 13. Dinka, a proud height amidst a land scarred by history. In South Sudan, certain things are striking from the very first moment, and one of them is the imposing stature of the Dinka community. It's not the landscape or the architecture, but the feeling of constantly having to look up to meet their gaze, as if standing in a space where familiar body proportions have suddenly changed completely. The Dinka live along the banks of the Nile River and are distinguished by their tall, slender bodies and long limbs. Many, both men and women, are over 1.8 meters tall, making them one of the tallest groups in Africa. Basketball legend Manute Bol, at 231 meters tall, is a prime example of this characteristic physique. Some anthropological records even describe that in community life, height is seen as a symbol of strength, prestige, and the ability to protect the family. One biological hypothesis suggests that possessing tall stature and long limbs allows for better heat dissipation in the hot tropical environment, contributing to adaptation across generations. Furthermore, the traditional diet rich in milk and livestock products, which plays a central role in Dinka culture, is also considered by researchers as a possible factor influencing the physical characteristics of this community. Alongside physical traits, traditional lifestyles are maintained. Dinner is a crucial time for family gatherings, and livestock plays a core role in family structure, social status, and marriage rituals. Here, height is not merely a biological characteristic, but is also linked to memory, tradition, and cultural pride. In the context of a young country still undergoing significant changes, the people here still exude self-respect, hospitality, and a strong sense of identity where tall stature becomes part of their cultural narrative, history, and community spirit. If you had the chance to meet a Dinka person in person, what would you be more interested in learning about? Their physical characteristics, their lifestyle, or the cultural values behind them? Number 14. Livestock, assets, honor, and the key to adulthood. In many other places, livestock are seen merely as agricultural assets. But in South Sudan, in some communities, cattle and buffalo hold significance far beyond their economic value. They are linked to honor, prestige, family identity, and even the right to pass important life milestones. The number of livestock a person owns can determine their ability to marry, their ability to forge alliances between families, or their status within the community. In many grassland areas, herds are even given individual names, each animal remembered by its color, horn pattern, and quality as a way of asserting family pride. This bond is not only based on social power, but also extends to the spiritual and ceremonial realms. Livestock appear in coming-of-age ceremonies, community bonding rituals, funerals, and even peace agreements between different groups. When conflicts arise, cattle can become a negotiation language used to compensate for losses or re-establish relationships in situations where material resources are scarce. Some anthropological studies note that in traditional reconciliation agreements, the number of cattle gifted not only has material significance but also reflects the sincerity and sense of responsibility of the families involved. In daily life, livestock also plays another role, silent but enduring. In many nomadic communities, seasonal migrations are determined by the needs of the cattle herd. Wherever there is grass and water, people will follow. The rhythm of family life, daily routines, and even the structure of temporary villages revolve around the livestock. For them, preserving the livestock also means preserving the memory, tradition, and identity of their ancestors. Therefore, owning or not owning livestock is not just a matter of wealth and poverty. It can determine the ability to maintain family honor, protect social relationships, and even influence the future of an entire lineage, where each animal carries within it more than the value of meat, milk, or labor. It is also a symbol of memory, power, and cultural identity passed down through generations. Number 15. Small rays of hope. Amidst a reality that remains full of challenges. Despite facing numerous challenges, South Sudan is showing small but clear signs of hope. 20 years ago, average life expectancy was only about 48 years. Today, that number has risen to nearly 57. This isn't a huge leap by global standards, but it shows that, quietly, persistent efforts are making positive progress. In some areas, mortality rates from malaria and infectious diseases are declining thanks to widespread vaccination campaigns and drug distribution. Much of this progress comes from a network of international organizations and humanitarian groups who deliver vaccines, basic health services, and emergency relief to remote communities where local health systems are almost incapable of functioning on their own. In many isolated regions, mobile clinics and routine immunization programs have contributed to a reduction in infectious disease mortality rates, a modest change, but one that directly impacts people's life expectancy. Some programs also support the training of local community health workers, enabling villages to handle basic illnesses themselves instead of having to travel long distances to find treatment. However, the big question remains unanswered: how to ensure these advances are not merely temporary. With a weak domestic healthcare system, unstable infrastructure, and limited health education, the future of millions of people still depends on external support, built on a foundation of significant risks. If funding dwindles, many relief programs risk disruption, and years of progress could be reversed. The question is, what will shape South Sudan's future? Will it be oil, political agreements, or the communities living amidst floodwaters, grasslands, and their livestock? Will the children who dropped out of school today be able to return? And will the rituals that persist in poverty be viewed with respect, not just curiosity? What do you think will determine South Sudan's fate in 20 or 30 years? Nature, resources, or human choices? Share your thoughts in the comments below, as that's how we can continue this conversation instead of just stopping at a video. If you want to continue exploring edges of the map, where the world isn't just about tourist beaches and glamorous cities, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Here, each week we'll always present a different story, a different country, and a new journey waiting for you to discover for yourself. See you on the next trip.